worst managed Premier League clubs. So I thought, why don't we look at every single Premier League club and decide who is their worst manager of all time. Now, it's important to stress that this is Premier League manager, so it is only managers who manage them in the Premier League, not in other, well, they might have managed them like in the Championship or something, but they need to have managed them in the Prem. So bear that in mind, and if it's just from what I found, if I got your club wrong, let me know, but I think I've got most of these right. So at the end we'll also decide who I believe is the worst manager out of all of these, and essentially the worst manager in Premier League history. So let's begin. Arsenal, we have Stuart, Houston, we'll call him Houston. So Houston appears on this list despite never having been permanently appointed as Arsenal manager, mainly because in the Prem era Arsenal have basically only had Arsene Wenger as manager, and besides that it was George Graham, who was pretty good as well. Nevertheless, 25 games across 2 spells admittedly is more than enough time to prove yourself, and a win ratio of just 36% tells its own story. Houston first took the reins at Arsenal following George Graham's sacking in early 1995. His 3 months in charge led to a European Cup Winners' Cup final defeat and a poor 12th place finish. He stayed on as assistant manager following Bruce Rioch's appointment in the summer, but was back in caretaker charge again at the start of the 1996-97 season, overseeing just 2 wins from 6 before leaving to take the manager's job at QPR. Aston Villa, Remy Gard. Now Remy Gard's managerial CV is a bit of a strange one. It reads Lyon 2011-2014, Aston Villa 2015-16 and Montreal Impact 2017-19. Gard arrived with the villains rooted to the bottom of the Premier League table, and when he left less than 5 months later, they were still in last position. There was plenty of fun to be had in between, with Gard being best remembered for the strict discipline he tried to impose on the free-spirited Jack Grealish. Teammate Gabriel Abonglaw even recalled an occasion when Grealish was berated by the Frenchman for smiling at the training ground. In the end, this harsh treatment didn't work as Gard left Villa with a win percentage of just 10%. Honourable mention to Tim Sherwood. Bournemouth, Scott Parker. Well, this is a bit harsh on Parker, as Bournemouth have only actually had him, Gary O'Neill, Iraola and Howe as Premier League managers, but out of those, in terms of Prem records, I mean Iraola, as of recording, hasn't won a game, but still, that's a bit too early. Out of those, Parker wins the award. Parker did well to win promotion back to the Prem for Bournemouth, but when they were back in the Prem, it was a short disaster. They won their first game 2-0, but then after that, the team lost its next 3 games by an aggregate score of 16-0, including a joint record for the largest scoring margin in Premier League history with a 9-0 loss to Liverpool, which was his final game in charge. Following the Liverpool match, Parker expressed his frustrations with the club's transfer policy, stating they were currently unequipped for the Premier League. 3 days after the Liverpool match, Bournemouth parted company with Parker, and despite Parker claiming the squad was unequipped for Prem football, they comfortably stayed up that season, making Parker not look too great. Zerbi right now is doing great. Same thing for Brentford. They've only had Thomas Frank in the Premier League, so definitely not him. Burnley, however, we have Brian Laws. In 2010, Burnley appointed a new manager, but it was very surprising. After being sacked by Sheffield Wednesday, Laws came in January to mid-table Burnley and things didn't go well. They lost 15 of their remaining 18 Premier League games, plummeting from mid-table in January to the relegation zone, their relegation being confirmed with 2 matches remaining. Despite this setback, the Burnley Board of Directors agreed that Laws would be in charge of the team for the quest to regain top-flight status, but that didn't go much better either. After a poor run of results that left Burnley 9th in the Championship, and after a 2-0 loss to Scunthorpe United, it was announced that Laws had been dismissed. And right, he did pretty bad. Next, we have Chelsea, and we have Frank Lampard. Now this is a weird one because he had 2 spells with Chelsea, and both were not amazing, but the first was pretty decent. The second spell though, yeah, that has to go down as one of the worst of all time by any manager. In his second spell, Frank Lampard became the first manager in the 118-year history of Chelsea to lose each of their first 4 matches in charge. In fact, Lampard would lose his first 6 games back in charge and ended up winning just a single game for Chelsea in his return as interim. Now, to be fair, he did come into a pretty dreadful situation, but still, I think with a half-decent manager, you would get a lot more than that, and unfortunately, one of Chelsea's best ever players is probably Chelsea's worst ever manager. Crystal Palace, Frank de Boer. There was plenty of excitement when Frank de Boer took over at Selhurst Park in summer 2017. Crystal Palace had grown tired of Sam Allardyce's style, and de Boer's arrival was supposed to herald a new era of total football, with the Dutchman vowing to get the Eagles playing like Ajax in his first press conference. It didn't quite transpire like that. Instead, de Boer completely failed to get a tune out of his squad, who were far more suited to a more direct approach. Staggeringly, Palace would lose all 4 of his games in charge without scoring a single goal, and de Boer became the quickest manager sacked in Premier League history. Everton, Mike Walker. Although Walker oversaw an extraordinary last-day escape from relegation, with Everton securing a 3-2 victory over Wimbledon despite being 2-0 down, Everton made a disastrous start to the 1994-95 season, failing to win a league game until November under Mike Walker. With Everton bottom of the table and having made their worst start to a league season, Walker was sacked, having spent just 10 months in charge and recording only 6 league wins, leaving him with the worst record of any post-war Everton manager. To make this even worse, after Walker's dismissal, Everton went on that season not only to avoid relegation but also to win the FA Cup. Honourable mention to Rafa Benitez, though he was very close in taking this. But I think the fact that that team won the FA Cup as soon as he left kind of shows how bad this manager was. Fulham, Claudio Ranieri. Now, Fulham have had a lot of shocking Premier League managers, but sadly it's Claudio Ranieri. In 2018, Claudio Ranieri came into Fulham, his first job in England since winning the league with Leicester, but this was definitely not as good. It started off well with a 3-2 win, but Ranieri only lasted 3 months and won just 3 games out of his 17. He didn't get Fulham was a close second though. Luton, nobody, of course. Liverpool, Roy Hodgson. Hodgson is fondly remembered by most of the clubs he's managed over a lengthy career, but there's no chance of that at Liverpool. The legacy of his summer signings, Raul Meireles, Joe Cole, Christian Bolson, Borkan Geski, Brad Jones, Danny Wilson, John Joe Shelby, and Milan Jovanovic, says all you need to know about Hodgson's stay at Anfield. He lost in the League Cup at Anfield to League 2 Northampton, and after a loss to newly promoted Blackpool, Liverpool were in the relegation zone, and Hodgson even admitted they were in a relegation battle. He only lasted half a season before being replaced and is remembered as the worst manager in Liverpool history. Man City, Joe Royle. After 11 months out of the game, Royle accepted the challenge to manage Man City in February 1998. It started off well, to be fair, as he delivered an instant promotion, winning the 1999 Division 2 playoff final. A year later, he delivered City a second successive promotion as they finished runners-up in Division 1 and clinched a place in the Premier League on the final day of the league season. However, Royal side continually failed to perform, seeing them relegated after only one season in the top flight. And to make that even worse, Royal legally challenged the club for the size of his payoff after City bosses sacked him for being incompetent. So, yeah, worst manager on and off the field due to pretty sour relations. Manchester United, Ralph Rangnick. Honourable mention to David Moyes, but he came into quite a bad mess and Rangnick takes the prize, despite being an interim and not all of it being his fault. Under Rangnick, United finished the season in 6th place with 58 points, the worst points total record in their Premier League history. They also had some very embarrassing losses, losing 4-0 to Liverpool, 4-1 to Man City and 4-0 to Brighton. To top it off, the whole point of Rangnick coming in was so that he would implement his style and move into a director of football role after. Well, after this disastrous spell as manager, he didn't even do his consultancy role and left. And then, the cherry on top of the cake, he went and managed Austria national team and has done sensational for them, helping them qualify for the Euros. So, absolute disaster everywhere you look at disappointment. Newcastle, we have John Carver. Now, no one is disputing John Carver's love for Newcastle. We're simply suggesting that he might not have been cut out for life as a Premier League manager. Carver was appointed from his post as assistant manager initially on a caretaker basis before being handed the reins until the end of the season after Alan Pardew left the club to take over Crystal Palace. Between March and May 2013, Carver oversaw a quite astonishing run of 8 successive league defeats that was finally broken by a 1-1 draw with West Brom. Losing to already relegated QPR, then set up a date with Destiny on the final day. The Magpies did triumph in that crunch fixture though, beating West Ham 2-0, but the writing was already on the wall and Carver, who once described himself as the best coach in the Premier League, was promptly sacked. Nottingham Forest, nobody, they haven't been in the Premier League for a long time, and Steve Cooper is perfectly fine. Spurs, Jacques Santini. Jacques Santini arrived at Tottenham for the 2004-05 season with an impressive reputation. He had briefly transformed French side Lyon into a force to be reckoned with before earning himself the managerial role of the France national team in 2002. However, his tenure at Spurs was not quite as successful, to say the least. In 11 league games, he only won 3, giving him the worst win percentage of any Tottenham manager in the Premier era. Santini took the managerial position at Spurs after Euro 2004, he surprisingly announced his resignation vote after just 13 games. Officially, Santini left due to personal problems, but it was widely reported that a series of disagreements with the then sporting director Frank Arnson led to his departure. Either way, whatever reason, his short spell didn't go very well. Sheffield United, nobody here. I mean, if you want to be harsh, you could say Paul Heckingbottom, and it probably will be that eventually, but right now I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. West Ham, Avram Grant. In 2010, Avram Grant came into West Ham with a big reputation managing Chelsea, but things didn't go very well at all. Grant led West Ham to its worst ever Prem start. Their first point was gained at the end of September, with Grant not even in charge for the game, as it was a Jewish holiday, so his assistant got him his first point. The Hammers had won just 2 Premier League games by the end of November and were bottom of the table. West Ham won only 7 Premier League games under Grant in a season where they won more cup games than league games, and as you probably guessed, were relegated under Grant. Absolutely shocking. And finally, Wolves, Terry Connor. Poor old Terry Connor. If ever a man wasn't suited to being the number one, he was it. Appointed by struggling Wolves after they failed to attract any sufficiently experienced candidates, Connor muddled through the remainder of the season as Wolves slipped further and further away from safety. By the time the season ended, the stats made for pretty grim reading. 13 games, 0 wins, 4 draws and 9 losses, scoring just 12 and conceding 33. But there we go. That is the worst Premier League